Do you no longer feel pleasure? The answer lies in your emotional trauma. There is a silence that invades the body when the soul gets tired. A silence that is not peace, but absence. Absence of meaning, color, desire. An emptiness that arrives quietly, and suddenly, everything loses its flavor. The touch no longer shivers. The hug no longer warms up. The laughter seems rehearsed. Life goes on, but you are no longer in it entirely. Something in you has closed in. Something in you stopped responding. And maybe no one notices. Maybe you'll still smile at the photos, say you're fine, do what needs to be done. But inside, everything is withered. It's as if pleasure has abandoned you. But what if I told you he didn't leave you? That in fact, it was you who had to leave him to survive? Pleasure is not just an instant of joy. It is a language of the soul. A sign that we are alive, connected, open. When it disappears, it's not the world that's dull. It's you who had to protect yourself too much. Because one day, feeling hurt, feeling it was dangerous, feeling brought abandonment, shame, or fear. And then the body learned to close itself, to anesthetize himself, to defend even what was good. And pleasure became a stranger, a distant luxury, a dusty memory. But make no mistake, it's not that you're no longer able to feel. It's just that you had to hide from yourself so you wouldn't break. Your emotional system, the one that tries to keep you alive at any cost, has learned to cut the path of pleasure to prevent pain from invading it again. You protected yourself. And protecting yourself is beautiful, it is human. But in doing so, you have also built a wall between your present and your most sensitive truth. Back then, perhaps still in childhood, something broke in you. It may have been the absence of a lap, an out-of-turn scream, a touch that hurt, an early guilt. It may have been a betrayal, a violence, a silent pain that no one saw. It doesn't matter the name, it matters the effect. Pleasure was confused with danger. And when this happens, the body goes on alert. The soul withdraws. And pleasure, which should be a safe space, becomes a threat. So you grew up learning how to survive. Performing. To be with others without being with yourself. To desire without giving in. Playing without feeling. To live without being moved. And deep down, a nameless sadness began to live in his chest. A sadness that is not only yours, but also that of the generations that came before. Because trauma is not just individual. It runs in the veins of your family, your culture, your people. And it silences voices, closes bodies, erases desires. But the body does not forget. He guards. He repeats. He asks, even if silently, for healing. And one day you start to wonder, why can't I feel it? Why don't I get emotional about anything anymore? Why does everything seem so distant, so automatic? And this question is the beginning, because it breaks through torpor. She denounces falling asleep. She invites you to come back, returning to the center, to go back to what you had to give up to continue. Pleasure is not superfluous. It is essential. It is living proof that you are in touch with what is true. And for it to come back, you don't need to force, or seek outside, or run after intense experiences. The way back isn't through excitement, it's through reconnection. It is looking inward with tenderness. It is by asking yourself, with courage, at what point did I stop trusting what I feel? Where did my heart break and I had to pretend it was okay? Maybe you cry. Maybe you remember scenes that you thought were forgotten. You may realize that you have not allowed yourself to lie on the floor and breathe deeply for a long time. Maybe you notice that you're exhausted from carrying masks, from meeting expectations, from trying to be strong all the time. And all of this is also part of the journey, because feeling pain is, paradoxically, the way back to pleasure. It is necessary to go through the pain that blocked feeling in order to feel again. The pleasure is in the now. But to access it, you need to be whole. And being whole takes courage. Courage not to abandon yourself anymore. Courage to recognize your wounds. Courage to take a step towards your most fragile humanity. Because it is in it that beauty lives. Pleasure does not live in perfection. It lives in vulnerability, in spontaneous laughter, in the shiver that comes from the light touch, in the gaze that meets another gaze without fear. The moment you allow yourself to be who you are, without defenses. If today you feel that the pleasure is gone, don't blame yourself. Take your time. Just listen to that emptiness. He has something to say. He's calling you home. To the place where pleasure and feeling are not dangers, but bridges. Bridges back to life. And that life, your life, still pulsates, even if in silence. It still wants to be lived with intensity, with truth, with soul. You're not broke. It is in process. And every process starts with a question. Yours has already been done. Now walk with her. And listen to what your body, your history, your silence have to reveal to you. The pleasure was not lost. He just waits for you in the place where you stopped listening to each other. There are memories that do not have images, but live in the body. Scars that don't bleed, but still burn inside. And that's where the real trauma lies. Not in what happened, but in what happened inside you when it happened. It's not the fact itself, it's what he destroyed. It is the disconnection that he generated. The disconnection of you from yourself. With your sensitivity. With your joy of existing. Often, pleasure falls silent because the soul learned that being too alive was dangerous. Feeling too much was risky. Loving too much was painful. So you were cringing, adapting, molding themselves to what they expected. To the looks, to the silences, to the can't, to the shouldn't, to the that's wrong. And little by little, the body that was a temple became a prison. The emotion that was a compass became a threat. The desire that was life turned into guilt. And all of this happens slowly, so slowly that you don't even notice it. He only notices it later, when he is already distant from him. When he no longer knows what he really feels. When he begins to confuse pleasure with distraction, desire with need, love afraid of being alone. And then you go on living on the margins of your own essence. Repeating patterns. Seeking outside what was lost inside. Trying to fill what is not filled with anything. But the body always gives signals. He closes himself off, gets tired, withdraws. He falls ill in silence. He whispers, "Listen to me." And when the pleasure is extinguished, it is because this listening has been forgotten. You stopped touching yourself with presence. To look at each other with love. To inhabit oneself with truth. And so, pleasure turns into absence. An echo of what once was. A sigh of something that still lives on, but is trapped under layers of fear, shame, and silence. The good news? He's still there. Sleeping, but alive. And it awakens when you decide to come back. Back to its inner shores. For the parts that were left behind. For the feelings that have been rejected. To the versions of you who cried alone in the dark. Because every trauma is a story that stopped in the middle. And all lost pleasure is a sequel that has not yet been written. It is not about rescuing pleasure in a hurry. It is about rebuilding the path. A path where touch is welcoming, not invasion. Where desire is an expression of the soul, and not a hole of need. Where the body is heard, not forced. Where you learn, perhaps for the first time, that feeling is not wrong. That there is an immense beauty in feeling. That there is a sacred force in the pleasure that is born from the encounter with yourself. You may need to relearn how to breathe. Silencing the voices that told you I couldn't. To let go of the weights that you were taught not to trust. Maybe he needs to cry what he didn't cry. Say what was silent. Forgive yourself for having abandoned yourself. Because that's the beginning of healing, not to chase after pleasure, but to remove what blocks it. And that takes courage. It requires kindness. It requires presence. The pleasure starts to come back when you choose to be whole. When you stop running away from your pain. When he accepts that he doesn't have to fix himself, but to hug himself. And little by little, like someone returning home after a long trip, you begin to feel a little shiver, a tear that comes out of nowhere, a smile that is born for no reason, a silence that embraces you instead of scaring you. This is rebirth, the return to the body as home, to emotion as a path, to life as presence. Pleasure, then, no longer needs to be pursued. It sprouts. He dances inside you. He offers himself, unhurriedly, as if to say, "You are ready to feel me without fear." And you are, because he no longer needs to run away. He no longer needs to hide. You understand that true pleasure is not excess, it is presence. It's not euphoria, it's connection. It's not an escape, it's a surrender. And this surrender starts from within. It starts when you choose yourself, when it honors its history, when he looks at his own pain with eyes of compassion. And he says, I don't abandon you anymore. Then life changes. And even if nothing changes on the outside, everything changes on the inside. Because now you walk with truth, with soul, with a desire to live not only out of obligation, but out of love. Love for yourself. Love for the chance to feel again. Feeling again is like waking up from a long, dense dream. It's like rediscovering the taste of water, the warmth of the sun, the weight of one's own body. But it doesn't happen all at once. The return to pleasure is made up of small, almost invisible steps. A gesture of affection, a deep sigh, an instant of calm in the midst of chaos. Nothing spectacular, all quietly transformative. Because healing pleasure doesn't scream, he whispers. He insinuates himself through the cracks of everyday life, hoping that you will be present enough to notice him. It is in this state of presence that healing is designed. When you stop running, searching, pretending. When he accepts that he does not need to prove anything nor fix everything. When he understands that true pleasure is born from welcoming, not from demand. It's not about being someone better, stronger, or freer. It's about being who you are with all that it carries. With their pains, their fears, their limits. And yet, with its light, its desire, and its infinite capacity to feel. It is necessary to unlearn what was imposed. The idea that pleasure is sin, that feeling is weakness, what emotion is something to hide. These beliefs were not born with you, they were put in place. They were taught with cold looks, with harsh words, with silent punishments. But now you know, you don't have to carry those voices anymore. You can return them. You can break free. It can build a new indoor space, where pleasure is welcomed, not condemned. This new space begins when you decide to listen to your body as if listening to an old friend. With attention, with tenderness, with patience. The body speaks. He always did. But you were too busy trying to fit in, to survive, to please. Now it's different. Now there is time to feel. To observe the shiver that arrives without warning. The tear that escapes without explanation. The sigh that releases the weight of a decade. And in this reunion, pleasure reveals its purest nature. It is a response to truth. No to performance. No to excess. No to the approval of others. Pleasure blossoms when you are whole in what you live. When you touch someone with a clean heart. When you hear a song and something vibrates inside you. When you lie in bed and don't have to run away from yourself. When silence ceases to be a prison and becomes rest. Yes, there will be fear. Fear of feeling too much. To get lost. To get hurt. But this fear is understandable. He was born out of pain. And all pain needs time to dissolve. Do not push it. Don't deny it. Walk with her. Talk to her. Say, I understand why you're here, but now I want something different. And little by little, fear transforms. It ceases to be a prison and becomes conscious protection. It helps you to choose with more presence, to surrender more carefully. Perhaps, at some point, you realize that you are no longer anesthetized. That a light touch is enough. That a deep conversation leaves you at peace. That you no longer need to seek peaks of pleasure to feel alive, because now you are already alive. I really live. With all the colors, the tones, the ups and downs. You feel it. And to feel, as you well know now, is a miracle. It is the return to what you have always been before the pain. This new form of pleasure is subtle but profound. It does not depend on the other. It does not require a stage. It is born from the bond with your own soul, of affection for his past, of the decision not to abandon himself anymore. And when you become intimate with yourself, everything changes. The world remains the same, but you look different. Different listening. He loves differently, not out of need but by choice. For freedom. And in this freedom, pleasure is transformed into something even greater. It becomes felt. Purpose. You start to live more lightly, even carrying the same story. Because now there is room for everything, for laughter, for crying, for desire, for rest. There is no more censorship. There is integration. There is permission. And it is this permission that paves the way for a lasting pleasure. One that does not go out when the light goes out, because it comes from within. You learn that the deepest pleasure is not the one that takes you out of the body, but the one that anchors you in it. It's not what distracts you, but what connects you. It's not what consumes you, but what feeds you. And it is in the simple things, a welcoming gaze, a touch with intention, a moment of shared silence. It is no longer a question of intensity, but of presence. And in the presence, even the smallest gesture becomes sacred. If today you feel this awakening, celebrate. If you still don't feel it, keep going. Keep going back little by little, inside. Because pleasure is not in the future. He is here, now, where you allow yourself to be whole. And being whole is the real miracle. There is an instant when everything is silent. It is when the mind stops screaming, the body stops resisting, and the soul finally whispers. At that moment, you don't need to prove anything anymore. Not for the world, not for anyone, not even for you. That's when you realize, it's not about finding something out there, but about allowing something to flourish inside. The pleasure, the peace, the love, all of that has always been there, just waiting for you to stop hiding from yourself. This is where the cycle closes. Not as an endpoint, but as a point of return. Like someone who goes around his own abyss and, instead of falling, learns to dance on the edges of it. You understand that there is no full pleasure without inner truth. That there is no healthy desire without respect for what you feel. That every impulse that scares you is just a part of you asking for attention, asking for light, asking for shelter. And the light arrives. Not in the form of explanations, but of sensations. A heat in the chest, a calm without reason, a quiet certainty that you are where you need to be. You haven't shaken off the past, but you've learned to look at it without running away. You learn that your pain does not define you, but reveals you. That your desire is not an enemy, but a bridge. That pleasure is not the end. It is the beginning of a deeper reunion. There is a fierce beauty in those who have allowed themselves to break and have chosen to rebuild themselves. Not to be perfect, but to be true. Those who experience this return know that feeling is a gift. And that pleasure, when it is born of the soul, does not corrupt. It heals. It reconnects. He redeems. It restores to the body the dignity that fear tried to take away. It restores to the touch the intention that haste has forgotten. It gives back to the presence the sacred that the noise tried to erase. And in this new time, you discover that pleasure is simple. He is in a look that understands. In one touch without demand. In a body that moves freely, not to be desired, but because it wants to live. You no longer seek approval. It seeks connection. And it is in this place that pleasure grows like a flower in fertile soil. With deep roots and soft petals. With strength and delicacy. With truth. You also learn that the body is not just skin, muscle, flesh. He is memory. He is language. He is altar. And when you inhabit it with respect, it responds with gratitude. He sings. He vibrates. It flourishes. Because it was made for that, to feel, to love, to exist with wholeness. Not as an object, but as a temple. Not as a performance, but as a presence. There's a new rhythm now. Slower, more conscious. You no longer chase after pleasure, you attract it with your own wholeness. Because true pleasure is a consequence, not a goal. Comes when the soul smiles. When fear recedes. When touch meets reciprocity. When desire is welcomed, not judged. When you accept yourself completely, even in the parts that still hurt, still tremble, still hesitate. And even on the days when the pain returns, you already know the way. He already knows that he doesn't need to run away. That you can sit with it, listen, welcome. That pleasure does not require the absence of pain. It requires only presence. And with presence, everything changes. Pain becomes a bridge. Fear becomes a warning. Desire becomes a compass. Life pulsates again. And pleasure is no longer the exception and becomes part of the journey. You walk now with another look. A look that sees beyond the masks, that recognizes the beauty of those who feel, of those who cry, of those who love. Because all of this is sacred. All of this is human. And being human in the end is this, allowing yourself to be whole. Even when it hurts. Even when it scares. Even when the world doesn't understand. You understand. And that's enough. This understanding transforms everything. It transforms the simplest touch into prayer. The most honest word in deliverance. Silence shared in living presence. Pleasure in communion. Nothing needs to be great to be profound. The profound lives in the real. In everyday life. In the gesture that cares. In the embrace that supports. In the body that feels without fear, without guilt, with surrender. And if someone asks you what has changed, you may not even know how to explain it. Because it was not an external change. It was something inside you that reconnected. That he remembered. Who decided to live with more truth. Pleasure now is not noise, it is melody. It is not an escape, it is a path. It's not lack, it's completeness. And this completeness does not depend on anyone but you. You learn to be with yourself. To look at each other without shame. To touch each other with reverence. To desire without hiding. And in that desire, there is something greater than the impulse. There is a will to live with intensity, with lightness, with soul. There is a desire to be who you are, without censorship, without mutilation, without guilt. This is the quietest and most powerful revolution. That of those who no longer need to hide to be loved. Of those who do not exchange truth for acceptance. Of those who feel pleasure for being alive, not for escaping life. And when you get to that place, there's no going back. Because you recognized yourself. And no one can take that away from you. You are presence. You are guiltless desire. You are pleasure that is born from the soul. And the world needs that, people who feel it. People who heal. People who love without getting lost. People who inhabit the body with the lightness of those who, finally, have returned home. At the end of every journey, there is a mirror. A mirror that reflects not only the image, but the truth. You get closer and for the first time, you don't look away. There is no more shame in his features, nor anger in the scars. There is a gentle acceptance. An old tenderness, like someone who finds a friend lost long ago. This reflection does not show perfection. Show presence. It shows someone who walked inside his own pain and did not get lost. Someone who learned to love even what he once wanted to forget. Pleasure is now no longer about intensity, it's about wholeness. It is no longer the momentary apex, but the silent continuity of being in oneself. The subtle joy of existing in the body without fighting it. To allow touch to be expression and not defense. To know that each cell holds memory, but also holds possibility. And you chose. He chose not to repeat the cycle of absence. He chose to inhabit himself. This dwelling is not only physical, it is emotional, spiritual, vital. You have become home to yourself. And when that happens, the whole world changes. Places cease to be a threat and become scenery. People stop being a mirror of lack and become a reflection of connection. You no longer despair of affection, because now you offer it to yourself with constancy, with care, with depth. Your desires, once confused and hidden, now have a clear voice. They don't scream, they don't beg, they ask with dignity. And they receive it with joy. Because when there is truth in willing, pleasure comes without violence. He dances with time. He smiles with his soul. It rests on the skin lightly. You have understood that it is not about erasing the past, but about rewriting the way it lives in you. The injured child who was once ignored now has a lap. The confused teenager who sought to understand himself now has space. The exhausted adult who no longer knew how to feel now has relief. Because you looked at yourself. He listened. He was welcomed. And there is no greater cure than this, to allow yourself whole, with all the versions you have ever inhabited. Honor each one, even the ones that hurt, because they all brought you here. And here, in this now, you breathe deeper. Because the weight is gone. Because the urgency gave way. Because pleasure has become natural, like the light that enters through the window at dawn. It does not need to be explained, nor justified. just sense. You reconnected with the simple, with the essential, with that invisible thread that unites the body to the soul and transforms the touch into poetry. You know that difficult days will still come, that there will still be memories that hurt, absences that tighten, voids that resonate. But you are no longer hostage to this. You are root. You are shelter. You are a living presence. And it is from this presence that the rarest pleasure springs, that which does not depend on anything other than being whole, of being true to oneself, of allowing yourself to be light. The eyes that once sought validation now see beauty in themselves. The hands that begged for touch now offer affection firmly. The body that once screamed for freedom now dances with time, with the other, with itself. Because when you free yourself from guilt, everything changes. Love ceases to be lack. Desire ceases to be torment. Pleasure ceases to be punishment. You are no longer lost. He is awake. And in this awakening, what was pain becomes art. What was silence becomes a song. What was fear becomes a path. And the path, even when uncertain, is yours. Traced with the steps he chose, with the falls he lifted, with the discoveries he kept in his chest. Nothing was in vain. Every tear was a seed. Each absence was solo. Each denial was impulse. Now, what you offer to the world is not just your story. It is your presence. It is the energy of those who know themselves, of those who feel guiltless, of those who love without a mask, of those who desire with soul. This is not learned in books. This is born from the choice to look inward and not run away, to stay even when everything invites you to escape, to trust that there is beauty even in the parts that no one sees. And there is. There always was. You just needed time. Of courage. Give a moment of pause to listen to yourself. That moment has arrived. And in it you made yourself whole. Not perfect. Not immune to pain. But whole. Capable of welcoming one's own shadow and yet recognizing oneself as light. Able to say yes to what he feels. Capable of feeling pleasure not as an escape, but as permanence. That's the end of the script. But it is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new way of existing. More sincere, smoother, freer. You now carry another kind of desire, that of living with presence, with meaning, with soul. And this desire, contrary to what they said, does not take you away from who you are. He reveals you. He honors you. He rebuilds you. You deserve to feel it. It deserves to be touched with truth. He deserves to play with respect. He deserves to love without losing himself. It deserves pleasure that heals, that elevates, that roots. And it all starts where you are now, right now. In this body, in this breath, in this choice not to run away anymore. To stay, to be. And being, my love, is the deepest pleasure there is.